whole week's kind of been like this. It's like a sleep for a few hours, podcast for a few hours, do some other things. Some sort of it's been a little bit wonky. So thanks for your patience. But what a sweet week it's been in so many ways too. So the fit today, by the way, this shirt. Actually, it's not this exact shirt, but this Charles Barkley shirt was a shirt that I had in middle school. I wore this like all the time when I was in the seventh grade. Now it strikes me as a little bit funny because at the time I had my room literally wallpapered in Charles Barkley posters. This was when he was still playing for the Philadelphia 76ers, so before going to the Suns. And I remember in middle school reading his book, the first little memoir, Outrageous. Now it seems funny to me because for anybody who's an NBA fan, I think would agree, Barkley's the person we all most want to hear from in terms of commentary and all that. And I think even then, I so loved his authentic energy. Not only one of the funniest human beings on earth, but I just love the authenticity. And so it's interesting at this point in my life how much these things continue to come full circle, right? And everything that's old is new again. So I ended up finding this shirt on eBay, the one I've got. So it made me very happy to be able to get the exact same shirt again because it got lost in translation many years ago. Though the one that I bought off of eBay does perennially smell vaguely like smoke, but otherwise it does make me pretty happy. So I want to jump right in, and I want to start with a new segment. I know I plugged this yesterday. I've been really excited about debuting Typecast. So this is where you send me questions, and I respond with a letter. Now, I find this to be pretty hilarious, and in the spirit of my week, I've been so excited about using my typewriter that I've not really had all that long for these. So first of all, I think it's a little funny that my margins are kind of off. I also think it's pretty fantastic that right as I got towards the end of this particular letter, my ribbon went out. Am I using the right language here? So I guess I will figure out how to change the ribbon. So the second half of the letter is actually handwritten. So I just think all that's kind of amazing. But I'm like, I'm not tweaking any of this. Part of what I love in this moment in general, I think some of you will resonate with this. Same reason that I think a lot of us appreciate vinyl again, something tactile about holding a record. There's something about typing on heavy keys. It's a time where I think so many of us, so many people in the world are relatively untethered to reality and things that tether us to ground and real life community, the stuff that is not kind of floating out in a digital space. There's just something about that I feel like is good for my own soul right now. So I did want to start with the letter, and I was excited that the first question I got is from a friend, Mike Skinner. Mike Skinner is a wonderful pastor in Texas. I have preached for him. And so I think there's something beautiful about the fact that the first one of these entries is to an actual real life friend that I know. Although he asked a really wonderful pastoral kind of question. And because I know he is a seasoned pastor and a wise pastor, I feel like I would be far more curious as to how he would respond to his own question to this. But I thought, yeah, I'll take a crack at this. So Mike asked me, from your personal and pastoral experience, what 2 or 3 theological truths that are commonly shared with folks who are struggling to find and hold on to hope are both overrated and underrated in their power and ability to help and encourage? That is an excellent question, Mike. Should I read that one more time? From your personal and pastoral experience, what are 2 or 3 theological truths that are commonly shared with folks who are struggling to find and hold on to hope, are both overrated and underrated in their power and ability to help and encourage? Yeah, well, multi-parts. Let's go. And I'll just read to you exactly what I wrote to Mike, and we'll send in the mail today. Dear Mike, I do hope you're doing well, old friend. It's a joy for my first of these to be from a friend, and also a humbling thing to be asked a wise pastoral question from someone I already know to be a wonderful pastor. I'd be much more curious as to how you would feel this, but I will give it my best shot. My 2 overrated truths are closely related. I love Romans 8:28 as much as anybody, but it's highly overrated as a theological panacea. All things work together for good to those who love God is a beautiful sentiment in a larger framework that feels much less hopeful when used to explain any of our suffering in a one-to-one way, as if every tragedy fits some kind of specific greater good. A God who orchestrates any of our tears as part of a cosmic chess game is a cold comfort indeed. This goes for any magic wand waving related, like God is in control or God has a plan. If that's what it means for God to be all powerful, the refusal of God to intervene or unwillingness to conjures a divine image that chills rather than comforts me. Surely it is God's refusal to cooperate or collaborate with death and terror that makes God good. I always think of David Bentley Hart's great line in Doors of the Sea: when I see the death of a child, I do not see the face of God, but the face of his enemy. In the same spirit, though, really any version of explaining human suffering strikes me as equally chilling. I remember how it went off for the first time in my brain like a siren, sitting with the book of Job for the first time after really feeling like I'd lost things that I'd never get back. That the real problem with Job's friends and their windy speeches was that they thought that their words could assuage Job's pain at all, not just that their particular theological arguments were wrong. The premise that there is a thing that can be said that could make sense of it was the falsehood. And surely why Jesus himself only contorts his face in grief and weeps when Lazarus dies. Only Jesus was wise enough not to bring the sacrilege that is reason into the holy temple that is grief. The most underrated theological truth for me is you aren't that big of a deal. Speaking of Job, there is a reason why the wild speech of God constantly recontextualizes Job's suffering in the light of the wildness of created things. What comfort is there to be found in all the cryptic language of who let the wild ass go free and the litany of beauty and chaos that runs through creation? The comfort of relative human smallness. That just might keep you warm at night in a way a puppet master God simply cannot. It is the big lie of our technology. You are really, really big, our technology is always saying to us. Nature offers a thunderous counter witness. You are really, really small. We're not built to carry the weight of destinies on our shoulders, or for all our individual likes and preferences to carry such godlike significance. Sometimes the only way our problems get smaller is if our lives do first. The second most underrated theological truth for me is Jesus' promise to never leave us or forsake us. It's often quoted, but never grasped, because we do not have the capacity to fathom what it means to be stalked by endless delight, to have a joy hovering above us that is lit up by our very existence, that this presence delights in us more than we could ever have the sense to delight in her. There is love within a whisper of you in every moment that is as electric with laughter at each glimpse of you as much when you're 95 than at the moment when you first came screaming into this world. It is preposterous to be loved that way, especially when we really glimpse the former revelation, that you are not that important in any sort of material way, having such little objective value, yet bearing the weight of infinite worth, is a punchline we can still laugh at when there are no jokes left to tell. The way we are loved is ridiculous. Next to nothing makes sense. There aren't many truths that I'd hang my hat on at the end of the night, but I trust those two pillars to hold up all the other absurdities. I love that you are preoccupied with hope, and I know your life and work brings it to many. Warmly, Jonathan. Thank you, Mike. That is a lovely question. I will be dropping this in the mail a little later today. Everybody else, I will be looking forward to your questions. Send them on in, and I will take them one at a time, just as soon as I can get there. So yeah, that's our first letter for the Typecast. Otherwise, I love the 4 things for Friday premise because it gives me a chance to just kind of do a random grab bag of stuff that I'm watching, listening to, reading, which per usual is very much all over the map. So let's see. Watching. This week, in the little bit of time I've had that I've not been doing things like this while being sick, I watched a new Netflix thriller called It's What's Inside. I don't know if anybody's seen this yet. Just hit Netflix this week. Kind of a sci-fi mind bender. It's got a pretty cool 90s sheen to it. It feels like a throwback movie in that way. Kind of a popcorn thriller. It's got a genius premise that I mean, I absolutely love. I kind of can't believe nobody's tried something like this before, where essentially you've got these like teenagers, more like young adults, I guess, who are at a party. One of them is getting married, and so the premise is there's this box with a machine where they basically, they're able to they wire into it, and then they switch into each other's bodies, and it becomes like a game. Some of you are already off of this premise, but some of you are not. As like a kind of quirky sci-fi thriller. I mean, I just thought the premise was so cool because, of course, lots of stuff starts to happen as they get into the game, and really wonderful way of playing with some of these themes right now in terms of virtual reality and the fine line between what's digital and what's real, and what it means to be embodied in such a time. So I'm here for all of that. I'm here for all the themes, and the trouble for me is it's for about the first hour and 15 minutes, it just crackles, like it feels really electric for a while, and then it feels like once stuff just starts hitting the fan. I don't know a better way to say this. Sometimes a movie is, I felt the film's a little too clever for its own good, like it's a little too conceptual. And after a certain point, you kind of feel like, oh, this is director with his head up his ass just a little bit. And it just feels a bit like, okay, just kind of lost inside its own head. That's how I put it. So really cool premise. Execution by the end didn't really work for me. I'm kind of sad to give it a mild thumbs down because the premise is pretty great, and it is mostly a fun ride. So there are things to commend, but ultimately I was a little bit disappointed. Maybe because I've been sick this week, and because I was so disappointed in the remake of Salem's Lot, that put me in mind of other Stephen King adaptations that I haven't seen in a long time, and a number of those. Just like the new Salem's Lot debuting on Max. A number of them have been done for TV over the years. So I think it was specifically the fact that I was sick that put me in mind somehow of Stephen King's Storm of the Century. Does anybody remember that one from 1999? So it was one of the only times, I think probably the only time in Stephen King's career that it was not a novel first. It was conceived to be a TV miniseries. And it's surprisingly it's pretty great. It holds up. It's really bleak, very King-like premise in terms of kind of a coastal Maine town, storms coming in, deep freeze and snow, and with that, an evil stranger. And very quickly, things start to unravel. But yeah, it's like it's creepy. It's a slow burn in the way the best Stephen King stuff does. It raises real existential questions. And you know what? It's funny because I mean they're somewhat different genres, but because there is a little bit of a horror element in both of these, it's what the film It's What Inside lacked for me. Really, is kind of there's no kind of emotional buy-in. Whereas I feel like what makes Stephen King's stories so great is that the characters are so richly drawn that then when really fantastic or supernatural or strange things start to happen. The buy-in is so deep because he writes people well. He writes characters well. And I think that's what you get in Storm of the Century. Great cast and really fleshed out characters. And that raises the stakes then for all the plot stuff. Whereas for something like It's What's Inside, it just feels like plot. You know what I'm saying? Like highly, highly plotted, but with no real emotional connection to any of the characters, where anything could happen to anybody, and at a certain point you simply don't care. The Penguin continues to be my highlight for anything on TV right now. Third episode hit this past Sunday night. This Sunday will be number 4. That's absolutely soaring. Cannot commend it more highly. So yeah, number 3 stuff I'm listening to this week. See, I'm a positive person. I am. And I really kind of come in wanting to love everything. So I almost feel bad that I feel like I'm full of negative reviews and news I don't need to be. The new Coldplay record came out this week, Moon Music. Coldplay's always been divisive. I am not a hater, I will tell you that. I'm not a hater. I've seen Coldplay 4 times. I feel like they always get knocked for their sort of populist sensibilities. At first, it was kind of like, oh, they're a poor man's Radiohead, oh, they're a poor man's U2, kind of knock off whatever. I really do think Coldplay songs at their best, Chris Martin is able to channel. The lyrics are not on that level, but his sense of melody at peak can hit like Lennon McCartney kind of heights for like seconds at a time. Like I feel like they're really lovely melodies, and I think there's some Coldplay stuff that just really works. I actually think among the first 5 or 6 albums, a couple of those are pretty underrated. And being the U2 fan that I am, I never am going to like just tune somebody out for having stadium-sized ambitions. That being said, I just feel like this whole phase of Coldplay's career that's gone like very pop. I don't think that's all bad. I'm willing to accept the premise that they're not really trying to be a rock band anymore, and I think that's all right. I just don't have a way into this music. There are a couple tracks off of Moon Music I thought were really great, which I feel like is always what happens with Coldplay now. Is they'll put out any of the last 3 or 4 albums, there'll be like a couple songs like, oh, that really land for me. And then most of the rest, like 60 to 70% of the record, where I'm like, I just feel like this is simply not made for me. I don't grasp it. It does not speak the language of my soul. I appreciate what they're trying to do. I appreciate the positive energy, and there's a clear structural thing that's happening of sort of like this kind of starting in a lower place and kind of kind of building into joy. I think it's like a cool enough premise, but that ultimately I don't get. I don't get it. Maybe for any more Coldplay fans who are still on for the ride, I feel like if I went to see them at a show tomorrow night, I'm sure I would love it. They would play a lot of the hits, and I would sing along. But I just feel like I don't quite get. Hello, Stella. Stella was insistent, by the way, today that she was going to be in my lap for this podcast, and I got to say, she's done a pretty good job of taking care of her dad. I got her and Brother Joel when I ran to the bodega this morning. Some hot apple cider. That's all soothing in its way. So yeah, that's stuff I've been listening to. Oh, listening. Podcast wise, best thing I heard this week. So on the Bulwark podcast, really great conversation with Timothy Snyder. I don't know if you know Timothy Snyder, history professor from Yale. They did an episode this week, I think it came out on Tuesday, called The Politics of Impotence. Whew, wow, that was a doozy. So Politics of Impotence, specifically about, and by the way, Timothy Snyder's most recent book is called On Freedom, just doing a lot of really important work. But specifically, this episode kind of goes into the sort of the faux masculinity, the kind of aesthetic, toxic masculinity of the whole Trump and Vance campaign. It's devastating. It's pretty scathing, but I also found it to be really insightful. So if you're looking for some good kind of social political commentary, that was probably the best thing I heard this week. I'm really digging I mentioned it last week, but I'm really digging still this season of Slow Burn. Part of it, I think, in the same way I talked about how like right now I'm so drawn to anything that's tactile and real and a little more tethered to reality. In the spirit of that, I love that Slow Burn is in audio form. It's real journalism. It's deep dive journalism, kind of old school journalism in that way, like just digging into kind of the bones of a story, and kind of going down all the tunnels. This season is on the rise of Fox News. The newest episode this week kind of gets into then the Daily Show is a bit of a counter to all that, but the way that then as Fox News kind of becomes established as sort of news as entertainment, like almost professional wrestling style entertainment, how that kind of just reshapes the whole industry. I think it's fascinating and a really good listen. It's not just heavy. It's a lot of fun. So I would highly recommend that. Things I'm reading this week. So really, I'll just commend one piece to you today, and where I think this continues to connect. Right now I'm I know Nicole is back to reading the actual newspaper every day. There's something I really love about print journalism, and that I can hold in my hands, especially when it's done right. I can't say enough about the Atlantic's cover story for September. 70 miles in the Darien Gap, Cailtin Dickerson with photographs by Lindsay Audario. I really can't say enough about what an extraordinary story this is. And this is long form, old school journalism, probably with the photos and stuff. This is goodness. Surely like a 20-page piece or something. But it's fascinating, and so basically it tells the tale as they walk with this group of migrants who are traveling from Colombia to Panama over this perilous 70-mile gap, and all the things that people do. Sometimes climbing mountains with babies in backpacks. I mean, it's just it's harrowing. And it's sobering, but it's also so human. And I think I'm just so struck right now by how much of what we hear in popular conversations around these things, y'all, it's just so much bullshit. It's just bullshit. People don't know what they're talking about, and they're riffing based on vague impressions and talking points from social media that I think are just so detached from people's real lives. So that's where, for me, even when these stories are heavier or sometimes show me things I wouldn't necessarily want to see or enjoy seeing, there's still this sense that just that way of tethering me to reality, to real people's lives and faces and stories, something fundamentally human about that in a way that makes me really hopeful. So I actually think the Atlantic has this piece up like online, not behind a paywall, so I think you would be able to read it that way. But if by chance you happen to be somewhere where you would could pick one up, I do think the photography is so remarkable that it's really something that you should check out if you can. So that's basically it for this week for Four Things for Friday. I guess the only thing I want to mention, and it feels like it should be said, this week has felt really special to me in terms of some of the things that I've been able to explore on here. So thank you for giving me that space and for allowing me to be on the journey with you. I know I think it was Rachel, one of my longtime listeners, supporters, has been great, had mentioned that the podcast on sexuality was far and away the most vulnerable thing that I've done, and it felt that way, and it felt really important. I do think it's a little funny that as teary as that was and as vulnerable as that was, yesterday's Typecast was probably equally fiery, and that also comes from a really heartfelt place. I do feel like for whatever the reason right now, it's just a time to be as vulnerable as we can, as human as we can, as authentic as we can. And part of what's happening with me engaging this in real time is that you're getting some less polished responses, some things in a way that I actually feel like is may be important on some level. I cannot mask right now. I couldn't if I wanted to, because I'm not a hater. I'm not a cynic. I'm a fundamentally hopeful person, and I'm always looking for this meal to be the best meal that I've ever had, and this film to be the best film I've ever seen. I'm always rooting for goodness in the world, and I just continue to be more and more disillusioned. I think this week, my heart has been very heavy with what's happening in North Carolina. As a person who's spent a lot of time in Western North Carolina, knows a lot of folks in that part of the country, it's devastating to watch people struggle, and it's infuriating to watch the way those things are politicized. It's especially infuriating to hear that from ostensible people of God, and just the kind of fear mongering and conspiracy theories, and it's just disheartening on all kinds of levels. I was thinking actually late last night, and actually I want to be intentionally careful about how I say this, because it goes in so many different directions. I think when I say something like what I just said, I think a lot of you would know that some of what that means is a lot of folks who've kind of sold out to the whole MAGA, kind of thing. That is what's right out there. But at the same time, it's interesting, like the Venn diagram of people who I know have been more, I don't know how to put it, hippies, granolas, mystics, that have kind of landed ultimately in the same place. It's like something about the formation that's in a lot of us. I'm still trying to kind of take that apart and put it back together in some ways. But what is it that causes some of us to be drawn to these deeply toxic ideas? What if that is just the moment that we're in culturally? What in that is there's some things in the water theologically from some of the spaces that we come from that kind of set us up for this. But yeah, it's just the common thread being a lot of disinformation, a lot of spectacle, a lot of just a lot of things that are troubling for me right now. And I can't stress enough how much for me, even though I like to do this sort of big picture 30,000 foot cultural commentary, these things are shaped for me in terms of, I always care the most about real lives on the ground in community. And I see the ways that these ideas are worked out, they play out in real life, that harm people that I love. And that brings out a certain kind of fire. And I'm not neutral about it. I won't pretend to be neutral about it. I don't think I'm supposed to be. And I think if there's anything from the last few years I would have to do over, it would simply be I would go harder than I have, because I do think on a certain level there's a real way that we need to contend right now for the people that we love the most and the things that we value and that we cherish. And I think that the world's worth fighting for. Got people in my life that are worth fighting for. We got kids that are worth fighting for. So we press on. Thanks for hanging with me. Last thing I will mention, so coming up in this next little season of the Zeitcast, even like within the next few days, so I put out a small book at the end of last year called The Book of Waiting. Came right out of the fire. It's pretty hilarious to put out a book on Advent and it come out 8 or 9 days into Advent as it did last year. So I never felt like I was able to launch it properly. It was one of those things. I just felt like I had some stuff that was kind of burning a hole in me that I had to get out into the world quickly. So I did. And but I did want to kind of seize the moment this year to be a little more strategic about that. So definitely we'll look forward to sharing some Book of Waiting content with you. I am looking forward to getting out on the road and doing a few dates around that. If anybody's interested, feel free to reach out. Definitely going to be offering at least one significant Advent retreat here in Greencastle. So I'll be sharing more information about that in the next couple of days. But yeah, I think for all the other things that we're experiencing in the world, for all the terror and beauty and joy, we are once again time to enter very strategically into that waiting and longing for God to make things right in the ways that only God can. So I hope that anything that you've heard today, something from the letter, or maybe just riffing a little bit on things that are happening in popular culture, stirs something up in you. I always love to know. Let me know what you're watching. Let me know what you're listening to. Let me know what you're thinking about. I really care about all that. And I'm grateful that we get to be on this journey together. Grace and peace to you, my friends. I will see you on Monday.